Hello and welcome to Off My Shelves, and in this episode we're going to be looking at The Tale of One Bad Rat by Bryan Talbot. So let's get underway. So I wasn't going to make a video in December, but I was watching my friends over at the Nerd Herd Comic Book Club, which is a great channel if you get a chance to check it out, and they were asking for recommendations on what to read. And because it was Christmas and they wanted a Christmas theme, I thought, The Tale of One Bad Rat, because it starts at Christmas time, would be a different and interesting read. And it didn't get picked, but I started reading it anyway, and it's the second time I've read through it, and it occurred to me that I should make a video on it, because it's kind of needed. More awareness around the themes and the kind of premise of this story is never a bad thing. But before I get into the story, I'll look at the build of this book. So it's a standard size hardback. There are a few different versions out. It was originally published back in about 1994, I think, by Bryan Talbot. Nice sewn binding, so it is sewn binding. This version in England, anyway, is published by Jonathan Cape, or Cape Classics, I think, maybe. Yeah, Jonathan Cape Publishing. Yeah, it's full colour and glossy pages, as I said. It's a really well made, well crafted book, and for about $14.99 cover price, it is a bargain, I think. So to the story anyway. The Tale of One Bad Rat centres squarely around Helen Potter, who is our main character, and when the story starts we catch up with Helen, who sees herself as a very bad rat, as a bad egg essentially, and as soon as you start the story she's homeless on the streets of London, and she's already fantasising about killing herself and things like that. So it starts off fairly deep and fairly in depth, and it starts off around Christmas time as well, but it's not very Christmassy in theme really, but that is irrelevant, because what Bryan Talbot does very quickly and very early on, he gives this glimpse of Helen's past and present, so she jumping in between the two, but equally having quite vivid fantasies of these different things happening to her, like suicidal attempts and things like that. But also she's a gigantic fan of the works of Beatrix Potter, and has been since she was about 6 or 7 years old. So her imagination kind of drifts off and creates Beatrix Potter's characters out of the real people she's meeting in the world around her, really. And as I said, it glimpses back to that childhood and the reasoning why she's on the street. And essentially those two strands generally meet up just over the halfway point of the book, really. So you start off when she's a young child, and you start to see what's pushed her to run away from home and become a homeless person essentially. And Bryan Talbot again does a fantastic job, because when that flashback happens, within the first couple of pages you just see one glimpse of her father's face, and just the way Bryan Talbot has drawn him and the way he's kind of depicted him and how he speaks, you're instantly kind of on the defensive. You know that he's probably the guy who has caused these issues in Helen's life, and you are proved right, because he's molesting his own daughter. Her mother hates her, and so she runs away. The story goes in paces really. The first section is the town story, so you're looking at her time in London, her time squatting and getting into all manner of different troubles on the streets of London. And it's amazing really how Bryan Talbot gets you to feel for this character really, really early on. You don't want her to be in danger. You feel instantly protective of her, or at least I did when reading. I felt instantly protective of her as a character. And when these dangerous characters were happening on the street, or when people were trying to take advantage of her, or even when people were being kind to her and she didn't know how to deal with that kindness or that physical contact in any way, and you feel for her, you really kind of get a strong sense of empathy for the character in every way. And then the second section of the book is her on the road, because various things happen in London, which means that she wants to go back on the road, and she decides that she will follow in the footsteps of Beatrix Potter, her idol, her favourite writer and artist. And so she travels up north essentially in the footsteps of Beatrix Potter, and there she meets a whole load of other people and gets some semblance of normality, and starts to really break down what has happened in her life and how she can move past it. It really does need to be read to be fully appreciated and absorbed, to be honest, because even though everything I've said is incredibly heavy and depressing in many ways and triggering in many ways, the way Bryan Talbot handles it and the way he depicts and writes it is so masterful, to be honest, because you don't get overwhelmed by it. You don't get kind of put off by it. These things, the abuse with her father and her parents in general is there. Her life on the streets is there. Her wandering around and having mental difficulties is there. Because she's making steps forward and not making steps backward necessarily, it feels like it's going somewhere. It feels like it's got an optimism to it on some level. And that's what I really like about this book more than anything else, is the fact that Helen, as a character, Helen really goes through the ringer, but then she kind of tries her best to make the best out of a bad situation. And yeah, and I wouldn't really want to say too much more about it than that, because it would kind of head it off for the past. Needless to say, it's one of those stories that really need to be appreciated. You know, we often forget about people on the street and people in different places and in different parts of their life. And it's books like this that really bring those stories, even though it's a fictional story, it brings those stories to life in different ways. And Bryan Talbot, in his afterword, actually says, the more child abuse is discussed in society or fiction, in whatever medium, the more likely it is that the victims will realise that it is something that happens all the time, and that they can speak out and be believed, and it can get stopped. And that is such a great sentiment, I think, because ultimately Helen, throughout this book, feels that she is that bad rat. She feels like she is the one bad rat, like she's done something wrong. She's not the victim, she is the person who has caused all these issues. And the story really is Helen coming to the realisation that she is not this bad rat that she thinks she is. She's actually a victim, and she actually has to realise that, work through it and talk about it. And again, that overwhelming sadness and empathy you feel going through this book is heart-wrenching, but then by the time you get to the end of it, that overwhelming sense of optimism is just wonderful, I think, and it's so well paced and well drawn and well put together. People walking past homeless people in the street have a lot of kind of assumptions, and this book is one of many things that helps to put those assumptions to bed, because your assumptions don't make any difference to anyone on any level at all. All people need is your help, and that's about it really. They don't need judgment, you don't need to ask questions, you don't need to do anything. And Bryan Talbot's story really does kind of bring that home to me, particularly at this time of the year when there's a lot of homeless people out there in need of help and support. Anyway, that is the tale of One Bad Rat. Apologies if you think I'm preachy at all in this video, that is not my intention, but thank you very much for watching. You will only see me in 2022 now, so have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and thank you very much for watching.